I'm Lauren. I already created an intro for this part of my video series on full site editing with WordPress. This video is specifically about creating a custom form plugin using a local agent. This is not something I've ever done before. I've used the local agent for a few little things, so I knew it was going to be kind of tedious. I know that the local agent is slow. Just nothing could have prepared me for the amount of frustration that I've already put myself through, and I'm only halfway through it. I've got a main plugin file, a few functions defined. I'm going to keep going, but the lady in the intro that follows this little clip, blissfully ignorant. I feel like a completely different person now after having gone through this. Not to be too dramatic about it, but if you're someone that gets, frustrated by proxy, don't watch this video. It will annoy you. There were mistakes. Some of the mistakes are mine, but most of the mistakes are are with the local agent. It's just kind of dumb. It's like working with a 4-year-old. So maybe there's some entertainment value there. If you've never built a plugin from scratch before, there may be some value there. But overall, I'll say this probably isn't my best work. So I'll just let the optimistic intro play. And the first section of this project, this video segment, is going to get us through to the main plugin file. We'll have most of the main plugin file done by the time this video is over. So it's probably going to be like 35 minutes. So you gotta be pretty bored if you've got time for this. And I edited out a lot. There are several parts of the video where I have to wait for the agent to think and generate. Thinking and generating takes anywhere from 45 seconds to 2.5 minutes. So I cut out as much of that as I could. Having said that, the content flow it's not great. It might have you wanting to scratch your eyeballs out. So if you want to see someone just fumble their way through custom plugin development, stick around. Hello, I am Lauren, your new favorite low-budget web developer. Welcome back to a series of indeterminate length on native WordPress 7.0 full site editing. In previous videos, we started building a lean block child theme from scratch, and today we're taking WitnessNearMe from the design layer and stepping directly into full stack plugin engineering. We need a basic registration form to validate our idea before we build an entire app. And instead of pulling down a third-party form plugin, we're going to build our own solution using WordPress core, custom database tables, a vanilla JavaScript, and PHP. To keep things moving along, I've prepared a markdown specification sheet detailing our database schema, public REST API namespace, and native reCAPTCHA v3 security requirements. We're going to feed this spec sheet directly to our local DeepSeek chat agent and let it scaffold our code baseline. Then we will manually audit, refine, and deploy the plugin live to our Hostinger staging environment. And the goal of this project is simple: minimal external dependencies, maximum reliance on WordPress core, and leveraging local AI tools to speed up the process without shipping our project details to the cloud. Let me provide a little context on this goal. When we use cloud-based AI tools, we're constantly feeding our project architecture, database schemas, and proprietary client ideas back into servers owned by big tech. In that model, our work becomes the raw material used to train their commodity product. We're just basic consumers paying for the privilege of refining their models. By pulling the inference engine local, running DeepSeek directly on our own hardware, we flip that power dynamic. Our local environment, our custom workflow, and our specific architectural blueprint remains our commodity. and the data stays on our machine. The execution cost is 0, and we shift the advantage back to our side. We become actual producers, owning the tools of our production rather than just renters in someone else's cloud. Little infographic down here to help illustrate this concept. If you are a mid-level developer, freelancer, or systems architect who wants to understand native full-site editing blocks without getting bogged down in Node or React build toolchains, this video may appeal to you. Before we start, let's run through a quick pre-flight check so you know what our environment looks like today. The stack. We are deploying directly to a live Hostinger staging environment. We aren't running a local instance for this site, but if you are working locally, your steps will be nearly identical. Prerequisites. To follow along, you just need an IDE with an inline AI assistant. I'm running my local DeepSeek instance using the continue extension in VS Code, and I have a very short video on how I set that up. I'll link something here-ish. The credentials. Because we're baking in Google reCAPTCHA version 3, you will need your API keys ready. I also have a link for that where you go to set that up. I'll show you how to define your public and secret keys securely inside your wp-config file so they never touch the database. The blueprint. You don't need to pause the video to copy our schema or code blocks. The complete markdown specification sheet we're about to feed to DeepSeek is hosted and free to copy over at oneoffboss.com. The link is down in the description. Alright, pre-flight complete. Let's open up VS Code and dive into the specification. Alright, we're ready to start. First thing I want to do is create a brand new repo for the plugin files. And I'm going to name my repo wnm-forms. Quick description. I'm going to leave this as public. We're going to add a README. We want to add gitignore, and we're going to use the WordPress gitignore template. License, we're going to use MIT. This license basically says use at your own risk. If anything goes wrong, that's your problem and not mine. We're going to skip the jumpstart your project with Copilot and just create the repo. Now our repo is created, and we're going to want to clone this in the terminal. So we want to git clone, paste that in, and this should create the new folder wnm-forms inside GitHub's. Typically, I like to create a dev branch. Let's do that here. We haven't changed anything yet, so we can just make our new branch here. Create dev from main. And we should be able to get that branch. Let's see if it lists the branches, both of them. This is my least favorite part of this. So we have a main. I don't see dev in here. So we'll git fetch. Alright, now we have this. Git checkout dev. So now if we say git branch, it's going to do this crazy thing again, but we can see it says dev right here. So quit to make that stop. So the dev branch has everything that was in the main branch. It's just a couple of files, so we're good to go. And after we've made some changes in dev, then we'll push them to the remote, and when it's ready to publish, or share with everybody, then we'll send it to main. So now we want to get some help with the plugin files. So I've still got the Explorer on local biz because that's where I have the specification and the sample config. We can go over this kind of quickly. Let's see if I can get an easier to read version of this. So we have the system architecture overview. So this is basically the prompt for the local agent. Expert systems architect, no dependencies, no Node.js, no React, and no WP CLI. So we're going to make this very, very simple. Core stacks, use pure PHP for backend, REST endpoints, and database mutations. Use vanilla JavaScript for Gutenberg blocks. Data footprint, strict isolation using a custom DB table. Do not pollute WP options with registration records. So what that means is we're creating our own custom table to go with our plugin. We're not going to use the existing options table to store or save anything. Database schema configuration. This says which columns we want. We'll just look over this real quick. Full name, email, zip code, registration type, created at. I think that's good to start. So the form, this really isn't like the best example to look at, but this was the inspiration. The form will go in the hero section in the layout, but this form is a little advanced. Not advanced technically, it's advanced in the sense that we would have already wanted our market validation, right? We would already want to be in the app building process when we create this form, because this is going to register a new member for the Witness network. But we're not there yet. We want to see if anybody's interested first, and then when we get enough people interested, then we start building the app. All right, custom REST API configuration, namespace, submission endpoint, metrics endpoint. These are very basic. So the metrics are going to be tied to this widget, which basically shows our progress in getting people signed up as interested. Security and validation constraints, endpoint permissions, nonce verification, Google reCAPTCHA v3 validation. Backend processing code must fetch the private key from wp-config, execute server-side remote post using wp remote post to the Google API, and then parse the JSON response. If the verification fails or returns a behavior score below 0.5, abort mutation immediately and return a 403 forbidden. So what we're saying here is when someone is filling out the form and clicks on submit, we're going to call Google reCAPTCHA and say, can you verify whether this is a human or a bot? So v3 is completely invisible to the front end visitor. And they don't have to click on anything, they don't have to solve any puzzles. When they click submit on the form, the verification happens behind the scenes, the validation. Data sanitization and input guardrails. Prior to database insertion, explicitly validate and sanitize input fields. Enforce record uniqueness. Before running an insert statement, query the custom registrations table to ensure the submitted email does not already exist. That's pretty self-explanatory. If it exists, gracefully short circuit, bypass the write operation, and return a 400 bad request. So these are some very basic foundational steps we're going to take. We're going to feed this whole specification sheet to the agent and see what it comes up with. As for the actual form block, because we need to have a way to put it on the page, we're doing native Gutenberg block specifications, vanilla JS. That means we're not using React build process for this. It's going to be very simple. So we've got the block that puts the form on the page. That would be here. And then we're going to need another block. This is block 2 that basically reads how many submissions we have, valid submissions we have in the table to create this counter. The difficult part here is that I've got this stuff in GitHubs in wnm-forms, but then I have these files in a local biz folder. I want to make this simple, right? So inside of our Git plugin directory, there's no reason why we can't have this specification markdown. The sample config we don't really need. This is just for me to explain how to set up the reCAPTCHA tokens. So I pulled this from my own wp-config. It's not called sample config, it's called wp-config.php, and I can show you where that's at. Go to this part, Hostinger. We want to look at the files in public HTML for WitnessNearMe, and I gave my staging environment a subdomain stg, so this is the one we need to look at. wp-config, not wp-config sample, wp-config. So I've already updated mine, and I've got my reCAPTCHA keys in it, and I can show you with this sample file how I did that. So you go past username, password, host name, go past the security salts. Note where it says add any custom values between this line and the stop editing line. So we have WP debug set to false right now. I should probably change that to true. So in my file, I added these lines. Little comment letting me know these are the reCAPTCHA keys. This is what I want to name them. And then the actual key goes here. Very, very simple. Okay, so with that, I want to get out of here. So we want to open a different folder. It's inside documents. No, it's inside this GitHubs, this one right here. Open. Okay, so now we can see here's our wnm-forms. But we want to copy that markdown sheet in there. WNM custom form plugin MD. We'll just call it wnm-forms spec MD. So we'll paste that in, save it. We are not using Copilot. Oh, where's my continue extension? Okay. Something went wrong here. Disabled because the current workspace is not trusted. What do you mean? Let's just enable this. Yeah, I trust this folder. Okay. Now we're back on track. We'll check on settings here. Okay, great. So this is still working. And we'll go ahead and open up a terminal. I don't know why I am nervous about this. Now we're in GitHubs, but we want to go into wnm-forms. This is where we're working. We're on the correct branch, dev. We need to be specific with this, so we're going to copy this relative path and basically feed it the prompt. A spec sheet for a plugin we are building is at wnm-forms, wnm-forms spec MD. Can you use this spec to scaffold the initial plugin files? I'll help you create a basic scaffold for your plugin based on the requirements in wnm-forms, wnm-forms.php. Let's create a directory structure and some initial files. First, let's set up the root directory with basic configuration. Package JSON, not sure why we got that. It is not a NodeJS plugin. It's going to be a WordPress plugin. No Node environment included. No React. Can you read the wnm-forms spec MD and ask any clarifying questions? Okay, it's saying it cannot read the file. So let's get this one more time. Copy the relative path. Are you able to read the file? We are definitely baby stepping through this. If we can get the main plugin file done, I think that would be a good stopping point for this video, because just based on these first few, I cannot directly read files from external links or paths since I don't have access to your local file system or the contents of that specific link. However, if you'd like, you can summarize key requirements. Let me know what aspects of the plugin's functionality or structure are outlined in the spec sheet. Are you for real? Something's funky with this. That's okay. Let's start a new session. Are you able to read the spec sheet at... This already looks wrong because that's not what we're doing. We need to create a custom WordPress plugin based on the specifications outlined in wnm-forms spec MD. I don't know if this is like too much to try to put into one prompt, but doing it anyway. Okay, this is looking a lot better. Looks like it understands what we're actually trying to do. I'll help you create a custom WordPress plugin based on the specifications in wnm-forms spec MD. Let's break this down into manageable components. Plugin activation and database setup, REST API endpoints, Gutenberg blocks implementation, security and validation. Here's the initial code structure for your plugin file, wnm-forms.php. Alright, what happens if I click apply code? Will it just put it into the file? It did. Looks like we have an error here. We have an error for this line. Syntax error, unexpected token as. What is the problem with this line? Okay, it looks like I'm just deleting this. We've also got some things missing here. This is a WordPress plugin. We've got some stuff that we're missing up here at the top. private static function create tables. We've got global wp-db right there. So let's see if we can get it to help us with what's missing up at the top here. For a WordPress plugin, there are some required lines at the beginning of the main plugin file. Do you know what those are? This looks mostly correct to me, so we're going to go ahead and add this. We're just going to use oneoffboss.com for the plugin URI and for the author URI. Plugin name wnm-forms, a custom WordPress plugin for managing registrations and forms. Version should really be 0.0.1. Okay, we have namespace, plugin activation hook, plugin deactivation hook. Create tables looks good. REST API init looks good. Register routes look good. And then we have some things that we're going to need to fill in here. I also noticed that we're going to need to create some extra directories. So we're going to need blocks, which should be nested within wnm-forms. Now we'll cd into blocks and create registration form and network maturity. Let's make sure, okay, network maturity, registration form. Okay, that looks good. Let's save this. Alright, we'll go back to this explanation here. Here's the step-by-step explanation of the required lines at the beginning of a main WordPress plugin file. Plugin header comment. This comment block provides metadata about the plugin, including its name, version, description, author, etc. So we got all that. Namespace declaration. If your plugin uses object-oriented programming, you should declare a namespace to encapsulate your classes and functions. So we've got that here. Class definition. Define the main class of your plugin. This class will contain all the necessary methods and logic for your plugin's functionality. Global variable declaration for wp-db. So when we want to talk to the database, we're going to need global wp-db. Since the WordPress uses the wp-db global variable to interact with the database, you need to declare it within functions or methods where database operations are required. Activation and deactivation hooks. Use register activation hook and register deactivation hook to execute code when the plugin is activated or deactivated. This is typically used for setting up or cleaning up the database tables. REST API initialization if needed. If your plugin includes REST API endpoints, initialize them using REST API init hook within the activation method, including block files. If your plugin uses Gutenberg blocks, include the block files in the main plugin file to ensure they are loaded correctly. Here's an example of how these lines should be structured in your main WordPress plugin file. Okay, so we've got pretty much all of this. Function wnm-forms. Do we have that? Yep, it's right here. Global wp-db, absolute path, init REST API, include the blocks, initialize the plugin. Explanation of each component. Plugin header comment. This comment block is essential for WordPress to recognize your plugin. It includes metadata. This is kind of redundant, but we'll go through it anyway. Namespace declaration. Using a namespace helps organize your code, especially if you're using classes. It prevents naming conflicts by encapsulating your functions and classes within a specific scope. Class definition: the main class wnm-forms module contains all the plugins functionality. This includes methods for activation, deactivation, creating database tables, and handling REST API requests. Global variable declaration for WPDB. The line global WPDB inside methods where database operations are performed allows you to use the WordPress database object to interact with your custom table. Activation and deactivation hooks. These hooks ensure that when your plugin is activated and deactivated, specific functions run. For example, during activate, it creates the necessary database tables using DB Delta. REST API initialization. The init REST API method registers your custom REST API endpoints. This allows your plugin to handle form submissions and provide metrics data over HTTP, including block files. If your plugin integrates with Gutenberg, you need to include the block files so their functionality is available when needed. By structuring your main plugin file in this manner, you ensure that all necessary components are loaded and initialized correctly, adhering to WordPress best practices and ensuring compatibility. So we're going to go to the file structure for this real quick. See, we've got blocks, network maturity, and registration forms, but we want to go ahead and add those files. Block.php and block.php, that's what we're calling them. So inside network maturity, we want to add, I'll just highlight this, block.php. Seems kind of silly, but that's okay. Registration form, does it really have to be called block.php or can it have a name? Let's make another block.php. And I think that's all. We're going to close this. I think that's all the files that we need so far. Everything else is in here. Permission callback, return true, callback class, get metrics. Is that defined anywhere? It would be right here. Handle registration and get metrics. So these are the callback functions for the two routes that we've registered. So I would say the next best step might be to go ahead and fill these in. For activate and deactivate, looks like we have the bare minimum set with self create tables. For deactivate, I'm just going to leave that blank for now. Okay, that is going to be a pretty good stopping point for this video. It does go on, I just have more to edit, so I'm probably going to try to do it in 30-minute blocks. And eventually, one day, we will have a working plugin. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. I'm impressed. See you in the next one.